And thank you for joining us here for this panel on strengthening the rising generation. My name is Jared Stoller. I serve as the senior pastor at St. Peter's Church, a congregation of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, across town at 54th Street and Lexington Avenue. A delight to be with everyone this morning. I want to echo the words of thanks to everyone who made this day possible. And I'm so thrilled about this panel. We gathered on Zoom about 2 weeks ago to sort of think about how this might unfold. And I said to each of the panelists here as we greeted one another for the first time in person, if you can have a great conversation on Zoom, which is the most uninspiring place to meet, right? You can do even better in person. So with that, we've agreed that we'll each introduce ourselves and take no more than 90 seconds to do so we can get to the real heart of it. I'd like to begin with my good friend, Bishop Victor Brown.
Thank you so much. Good morning to everyone. I'm Bishop Victor Allen Brown. I'm the suffragan bishop of the Worldwide Fellowship of Independent Christian Churches. We have over 2,000 churches across the globe. In addition to that, I am the senior pastor of the Mount Sinai United Christian Church in Staten Island, New York. And I also have the privilege to serve as one of 12 chaplains assigned to the chaplains unit for the NYPD. And so it is the largest police department in the nation, and I'm privileged to be one of their spiritual leaders.
Sister Freeman.
I'm President Emily Bell Freeman. I have the opportunity right now to serve as the president of a worldwide young women organization servicing young women from the ages of 11 to 18. I also have the opportunity to serve on the Missionary Executive Committee and work with our missionary outreach program throughout the entire world, and to sit on the CES Board of Education for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I am also an author and a podcaster and a motivational speaker, and have been a religious educator.
Thank you. Dr. Almontasser.
Assalamu alaikum, peace and greetings everyone. Dr. Debbie Almontasser. I am the CEO and founder of Bridging Cultures Group, which does diversity, equity, and inclusion work and bridging the divides in communities of color. I am also the board president of the Muslim Community Network and also the senior advisor for Engage Metro New York, which works on civic engagement nationally to engage young people in the political and civic process, and also author of Leading While Muslim.
Professor Wilkinson.
My name is Sam Wilkinson. I'm a professor at Yale University, where I help lead the Yale Depression Research Program. I'm a psychiatrist, so I spend most of my time conducting research projects to develop better treatments for those struggling with mental illness. I also have a deep interest in religion. I served as a part-time pastor for my local parish in the New Haven area for several years, and so enjoy reading and writing about religion, particularly how it can help people lead more fulfilling lives. So grateful to be here.
As part of the Lutheran Church and our ordination rites, we promise that we will not give people illusory hope. But we're going to begin this panel with a bit of good news, despite what we believe is good news, right? Despite the slide that we saw, there is, in fact, we believe, a rising generation of faith, right? Good news. We want to open this up first with President Freeman, talking a little bit about an emergent shift that you're seeing and others are seeing. Please.
So we've been following, as many of you have been following, the data on what is happening right now with the rising generation, and have come out of many years where we've seen a significant decline in religiosity of this rising generation until just recently. And we are finding a lot of uplift and hope in recent data that is showing that that line is not just staying steady, but actually rising and increasing as you research and look, not just throughout the United States, but also throughout the entire world. You are seeing a rising generation that is being called back into faith in remarkable ways. This is a group of youth that are becoming regular churchgoers. It's a group that is turning to increased Bible reading and scripture reading. I love, as we look at this transition that's happening. It's going from a brief interest in faith to an actual longing for depth and knowledge in faith. And I think there's reason for great hope in the encouraging signs that we are seeing there.
I'd like to turn to Dr. Almenstasser to pick up on a piece of that. Anything you'd like to elaborate on?
Absolutely. I'd love to elaborate on how I've seen this actually manifest within communities. And the way that I've seen it manifest is typically happens in two different occasions. When there is a natural disaster or a global event, that people start to question, do I have a faith? Do I want to be connected to a faith? And I've seen this over and over, where we've actually seen young people coming to learn more about their faith tradition. And within the Muslim community, and one of the founders of the Muslim Community Network, we've actually been able to help support young people finding themselves and their identity. And so we've done this through a program called Muslim Youth, My NYC, which actually helps them better understand who they are, where they come from, and how to be comfortable within their faith tradition and talk about it. And so over the years, I'm proud to share that we also started to explore doing interfaith work. So we've had the opportunity to actually work with interfaith groups on a program called Emerging Peacemakers, where for the past 6 years, we brought Christian, Muslim, and Jewish students together in England with Rose Castle Foundation, where they've gotten to actually do scriptural reasoning and reading together. And I think the most beautiful part of that program was not necessarily that the kids were actually proselytizing to each other, but they actually became more stronger in their own faith tradition because it really pushed them to learn about their own faith, to be able to talk about it. And that opportunity gave them the comfort and the trust and the safety within their peers to actually start having those conversations that when they came back, they're like, we want to be ambassadors. And so I really emphasize how important it is for us to do these kinds of programming and create that safe space for young people and give them the tools to be able to talk about it and be proud of their faith tradition.
The two of you, to pick up on a theme, I seem to be hearing faith and study, faith and relationship building, faith and action. Do we all see this? Is this a dynamic in this generation? Bishop Brown, you look like you want to say something.
I come at what you say from the premise that we were created from creation's dawning to worship. And so the question is not the capacity to worship, but who are we worshiping? And so to that end, I think one of the major challenges confronting the faith-based community is crafting a message which is palatable, that is palatable to young people. Understanding that in today's world, information is coming at them so quickly. And we are really in competition with the world. And we're in competition with all of the information that comes at them. So being able to package the message in a way that does not distort the message, but that makes it palatable and attractive to young people so that they, having the capacity to worship, will recognize that and turn to the Lord.
So I heard a little bit of faith and discernment, or faith and fostering understanding. If we could move a little bit into this idea of, it's a great segue here, into formation of the rising generation and the leadership of a rising generation. One of the things we know is that young people's leadership is both now and, as we saw on the graphs in the presentation, also in the future, perhaps even more critical in the future, given the numbers. And we know that young people need both formation across generations and then also peer-to-peer formation. Bishop Brown, if we could go back to you, could you talk a little bit more about that and specifically reflecting perhaps in the Black church tradition, what does youth formation, youth leadership, young people's leadership in the church look like today, and what might it look like tomorrow?
Okay, let me, as an introduction, just qualify that I do not pastor a black church. I pastor the Church of Jesus Christ that happens to be predominantly made up of people of color. So I want to make that very clear, because for me, if Christ is not Lord of all, he is not Lord at all. And so this whole thing of black church, white church, Asian church, that is a cultural reality. That is not a biblical reality. And if we embrace that, then we will see that there is the best and the worst of us, the worst and the best of us. Therefore, it ought to behoove all of us not to judge the rest of us. So now, having said that, let me address it from the context within which I pastor. Mount Sinai has a very, very strong youth and young adult ministry. And it does because one of our core values is what is called transgenerational impartation or transgenerational empowerment. How I see the church where I pastor is that it ought to be an institution that lasts in perpetuity. And one of the challenges I have discovered in Christendom is that some of us stay on the train too long, and we don't equip the next generation to pass the baton on to them. So we are very intentional in terms of equipping them and preparing them to pick up the gauntlet of leadership. And so rather than my key leadership designing the ministry of the youth ministry for them, we convened the youth and we gave them the charge to develop a ministry that is workable for them. What that did for us was it said to them, we affirm that you know what you want. Not only that, but when persons are charged with the responsibility of forming vision, they have a vested interest in it. And so therefore, they will see it in perpetuity. And so we make room for them and we affirm their voice. And we let them know that what they say does matter. And then we challenge them to develop a strategic action plan and what that looks like. Social media is very big. We ask them to gather and to talk about things that are relevant to their context. And then we sit and listen to them, and they get a joy out of that, telling us what we're not doing right. But it has resulted in a very, very successful both youth and young adult ministry. And then we have a pastor, a youth pastor, who's assigned just to that. And so it has worked out well for us.
President Freeman, I'm curious, in your work, particularly with young women, if you see similar dynamics, similar approaches?
Yes, very similar to what the bishop has been teaching us. I think one of the lenses that I view what is happening through is the realization that a large number of the rising generation that is coming back to church are the young men who are returning to religion because they see a place for themselves within religion. And I want to make sure that we are remembering the young women in this resurgence of faith and that they also can see an identity for themselves within their faith communities. One of the things that I really appreciate about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the opportunity that our young women have to serve in leadership positions, in presidencies that they are called and sustained to. And within that role, there is a growth process that happens as they see themselves as leaders in this church. And we learn as adult leaders, much like what you were teaching us about what you are doing in your congregations, to trust them, to engage them in faith conversations, and to learn from them, just as you were describing. It is a powerful thing when we allow the youth to teach us what they know. President Russell M. Nelson told the youth of our generation that they are unusually gifted in gathering and including others, and that includes others of all faiths. And as these youth rise up and they learn they can be teachers, they can plan gathering events and activities that will welcome in, just as you spoke about, all of God's children. There is great power that is coming behind us if we will learn to trust the youth that are rising up.
Professor Wilkinson, I think you wanted to say something there, yeah?
Yeah, I thought that was a great comment by Bishop Brown. It sounds like what he's doing is exactly in line with what we learned from psychology and education literature about how most people best learn. And frankly, the old model of sitting in a pew and listening to a sermon, for most people, that doesn't really get into that doesn't get into people's soul. So giving young people things to do, helping them develop the ability to teach, to even give a mini sermon themselves, they're going to need support. But as they do that, they will incorporate the principles of faith, the gospel, Islam, whatever faith tradition you're in, much better than if as you mentioned, some people hold on a little bit too long. If an older pastor or preacher sits them down and says, "Let me tell you how to live," that doesn't connect for most people. So sounds like Bishop Brown, you're doing an amazing job in your congregation and kind of passing the baton to the young people.
I'd also echo those comments as well and say that there's also, a growing phenomena right now, and I call it a third space. And this third space is actually social media, where we are seeing young people talk about their spirituality and their faith. And as I mentioned earlier about global events causing this, questioning about spirituality, there have been a couple of young TikTokers. How many people on TikTok? Who've actually used their platform to educate people. One in particular, her name right now escapes me, actually started a Quran study reading group where thousands of people, and she was not Muslim, Christian, thousands of people joined her, and she basically then made the conversion to become Muslim. Another one is, Lily J, who also is using her platform. So for me, this is a third space where young people are questioning and exploring and creating that third space. And I think one of the things that has emerged within the American Muslim community is now we are creating that third space within our houses of worship to welcome those who want to learn more, who want to understand what the customs, traditions, and rituals are. And it's pretty fascinating to see that the majority of the leaders that are helping within this are the young people who've actually experienced that very issue of understanding their faith and what it means, and being such great leaders to teach others.
The positive sides of social media, thank you for raising that up. That may serve as a bridge to our next topic area, which the relationship of spirituality and mental health, which is important to all people, but especially thinking in this panel about young people who are particularly vulnerable in a number of ways that perhaps social media might bring isolation. There are upsides and downsides to everything. The reality that our lives are being driven more and more by algorithms. So let's delve into this question a little bit and begin with Professor Wilkinson. What do you observe about the resilience and the well-being of young people and their spiritual and mental health? What do you see in both studies, and then I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that in the relationship to this question of social media and the full circle back to an actual religious community.
Yeah, well, there's good news and bad news. The bad news, I think, as many people know, is that mental health is not in a great state in America. And unfortunately, the rates of mental illness among young people have been growing steadily, really since about 2010. So, there's a problem. One of the encouraging aspects to this is that if you do have young people engaged in faith traditions, they seem to be mostly immune from this. There is a growing protective effect that religion and other traditions, so family life is also really important, that if we can hold on to these institutions, they in large part protect the youth from this scourge of mental illness that has been growing. So to the extent that you have people coming to your church, your synagogue, your mosque, the fact that they're there often protects and acts as a buffer against the rise in mental illness that you find in young people, which is due, I think, in large part to social media. There's no question that there are negative effects of social media, but also to a breakdown in faith and family and other these traditional sources of community, the discarding of in-person communities for chat forums and other things. So there's good news and there's bad news. I think this is a time that people like us need to speak out, and that the data is pretty clear that faith overall has a very positive effect on mental health and in a number of other social outcomes that pretty much all societies desire.
Thank you for those comments. I think it's really important to also ground ourselves in understanding that within every faith tradition and within even a specific faith, there are communities that yet don't recognize the importance of mental health services. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've heard, either an imam or a minister or a rabbi say, deepen your prayer. Yes, we're going to deepen our prayer, but we still need that support. And I think what's really incredible and what I'm seeing is a growing trend of actually houses of worship incorporating mental health services. So actually identifying people within their house of worship who are mental health providers and connecting families who need that type of support. And within the Muslim tradition, there is a long history of mental health services that right now is actually being studied very deeply to help people understand that mental health services should not be seen as a taboo, but a support mechanism to help people get better. Because yes, we can pray, but there are still the anxieties that people have and experience. And let's face it, we live in a time in society where there are so many things that trigger people, whether it's social media, whether it's just living through a major pandemic where people were isolated and had to relearn social norms. So there's a whole host of things that have happened historically that are really impacting our social and emotional understanding and existence as human beings.
Please, yeah.
Yep. No.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, historically, there's actually been a positive relationship between psychiatry, mental health, and religion. About 100 years ago, a rift started to develop. A lot of this was Sigmund Freud, who called religion a universal obsessional neurosis and thought we'd be better off abandoning our religious impulses. I think that, especially the last 30, 40 years that we've studied this rigorously, most people are realizing, okay, he was wrong about that, and that hopefully religion and mental health expertise can grow back into a more unified front to help each other, and certainly psychiatry recognizing and respecting people's religious beliefs and so forth, but also folks in the religious sphere recognizing that psychiatry can be helpful sometimes in certain contexts, and turning to that professional help in addition to getting a prayer or a blessing or going to temple to seek kind of spiritual healing.
One thing I would add to that I love, Professor Wilkinson, that you pointed out to us is many of the youth of this generation are turning to chat rooms. They're turning to online groups. And one thing religion provides that is different than that is a meeting place, a refuge where the youth come together in person and can have conversations. This is a generation that is willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to talk about some of these really hard things. And I would be interested what you're doing in your congregation, but one of the things that is powerful in our congregation is a course that we provide on our Gospel Library app that is an emotional resilience course. And this is a course that these youth can sit together in their faith community and have actual conversations about mental health, about struggles, about things that they're dealing with together, and they find strength not from a stranger on a social media situation, but from an actual person who's sitting next to them and going through that same type of struggle. And there is great strength that comes from a faith community, from meeting in person, from walking into a house of refuge and building relationship there, not just with peers or with mentors, but also with God.
From a cultural context, as it relates to the evolution of the African American community in this nation, we have had to endure tremendous atrocity, whether it came in the form of segregation, institutional racism, structured evil. And so we had to have a spirit of resilience. And the church served as not only a safe space, but it was also the primary advancer of social justice. So when it came to the issue of mental health, for all of what we've had to endure as a people, we knew and was always taught to us, as long as we had Jesus, we were all right. And that the religion was the end all, personal relationship with God was the end all and be all. So this whole notion of the existence of mental health issues within the African American community was an issue we felt that if there were any signs that someone had that, in certain quarters it was looked upon as demon possession and was treated that way. So we would try to pray those demons out of them. And it wasn't until real recently that the church within the Black idiom began to recognize and to embrace the fact that mental health illness is just that. So how we've addressed it at the Mount Sinai Church is that last year we partnered with Columbia University's Triumph program, and we had 4 of our members train with them to become certified mental health counselors. And so what they have already done is they've taken surveys of the entire congregation to make health care, care for mental health issues available to them. So not only have we embraced it, but we've put it into practice. So our youth at Mount Sinai have a safe space where if they're exhibiting mental illness, they have a place where those issues can be addressed.
Sounds like what we've heard is the importance of houses of worship removing stigma around mental illness.
That's correct.
The importance of houses of worship being places that perhaps even provide mental illness, and the importance of houses of worship in drawing particularly young people together in dialogue with themselves, peers, and then also across the generations. That the power of these two, of mental health and spiritual health in a way, coming together. We are at about the midpoint of our time together, and as a moderator, you do the riskiest thing, which is to open it up to a question from the audience. We hope this is a question and not a monologue. And if we have a question, we might be able to have 2 questions. So is there someone who would like to ask a question, please?
Yeah, I have a question and I'm a seminar teacher, and I work with the youth, and it's easy to teach the youth who is already willing to listen, to read the scriptures, and pray. But what would be the advice that we can have from you to improve our leadership or our teachings with the ones that is not so willing to read and teach and establish their communication or relationship with God?
Let me answer that. There's an expression that if you ever catch fire, people will come from miles around to watch you burn. Here's what I've discovered with young people. When they get excited about something, they will go out and get their peers. And then their peers will get their peers when they see that it is something in place that's relevant for them. I think one of the problems has been that some of us older folk don't trust that they can navigate this thing. And then there are some traditional houses of worship who are just that. They're so traditional and in love with the tradition that they can't see beyond that. So therefore, there's no place or space in there for the young people. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I add to that? I love what you just taught us. And I think one thing that I would build on is this. If we want the youth of the rising generation to be excited about faith, we need to be excited about faith. If we want them to be excited about Scripture, we need to be excited about Scripture. If we want them to be excited about receiving an answer to a prayer, we need to be receiving answers to prayers. They will see the fire in us, and they will long to feel the same light.
I would add to what Emily has just also shared and say that it's so important to give voice and agency to young people and identify young people within your congregation that have that fire, that have that inspiration to actually be cultivated to become the next leader in helping young people actually tap into that spirituality and love for faith. We don't give the young people enough opportunity. We always seem to doubt that they don't know much or they're too young. But if we just give them the opportunity to tap into their love of God, it will resonate and it will illuminate.
I'll share a brief story about this. I think the punchline is, if this is a youth like high school age or younger, working with the family, I think, can be very helpful. A couple of years ago, when I was a part-time pastor, a family started bringing one of their daughters, and all their children, but specifically they came because their daughter was falling into trouble, experimenting with drugs, and the critical point came when she ran away overnight. She was gone for a couple days, and they were just terrified. So they dragged her. They literally dragged her to church. This 13, 14-year-old girl, and it was clear she did not want to be there. But over time, with repeated invitations and demonstrations of love, she really softened. And in about 6 months, she formally joined the church. Her demeanor changed completely. And so it would have been really, really hard to reach her if the parents weren't really committed, if we weren't working with the parents, because they were the ones that quite literally were dragging her to church those first several weeks, even months. And I look at her now, and she's doing great. She's happy, whereas before she was definitely not. So how to work with those people who are maybe on the fringes a little bit. Working with the parents if they're living at home, but also just being persistent and demonstrating genuine, deep love.
Let me just say this real quickly, and thank you so much for all of what has been said. The 7 last words of a dying faith institution is, "We ain't never done it that way before." Back in the early 90s, McDonald's, y'all familiar with McDonald's? McDonald's, a board met because their marquee burger, and you know what the marquee burger is, right? Big Mac. Sales of the Big Mac went down. So group met, boardroom, what are we gonna do about this? Somebody around the table came up with the ingenious idea of taking the marquee burger out of a wrapper and putting it into a box. That's all they did. They took it out of a wrapper, put it in a box. It was still 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed, but you want to hear it backwards? No. But bun, seed, sesame on the onion, pickle, cheese, lettuce, sauce, special patties, beef all too. But here's the key. They didn't change the ingredient. They only changed the packaging. You get it? So as an institution, if we're willing to take the risk to move out of the comfort zone of tradition and change the packaging with the realization we're not changing the integrity of what's in the package, then you'll see that the youth will be attracted and they will come.
I promised that if we didn't have a monologue, which is a question, we could maybe have 2 questions, but then we had such a rich exchange. I don't think we have a time for another question. What I'd like to do is begin in inverse, because we were going to begin this last question with Bishop Brown, but we'll begin on the other end of the table and just turn to our final area of conversation here, which is hope. And maybe perhaps I could invite all of you to take a moment also as you hear these words of hope to perhaps write down in your own notes a word of hope for the rising generation to take home as well with you today. Your own thoughts are always helpful here. So to begin with, Professor Wilkinson, what gives you the most hope about this generation and the future of faith?
Well, I think we're in a moment of, I don't know if we're quite in a moment of renaissance of religion, but we're thinking about it. And so it is a critical time, and people are open to discussing this topic much more than they were, say, 10 or 15 years ago. And there's an opportunity for kind of a sort of grassroots movement where many of the, what I would say, anti-religious sentiments have come from, Hollywood, the New York Times, these kind of legacy media institutions. These institutions are being disrupted, and as Debbie pointed out, there are young people posting on social media about their faith, and so I think there is an opportunity here if people like us that are gathered for this forum can be vocal, not pushy, not coercive, but to share the joy and the fulfillment that faith has brought to us, and change the packaging a little bit. We're putting this in a box, not a wrapper, and it looks a little more attractive to the world, to society. I'm hopeful about that.
Thank you. And I'm really excited about this moment. And I think it is a renaissance. And I think we need to embrace it. And what I want to say is that I'm really excited about just the opportunities that young people have. And right now, they're making their own news. And they're talking about their faith. They're talking about their culture, everything that they feel is important to them. And I think if we are able to embrace that and help support them, and actually help them create the box. We shouldn't create the box. Let them create that box of joy and spirituality and the way that they want to actually share it with everyone. And if we do that, then what we are doing is cultivating the next generation. And also, let's face it, they have so many tools at their disposal, right? I'm not gonna, promote AI in the faith tradition, but there is so much opportunity for research, so much opportunity to learn about their own faith tradition as well as other faith traditions from a more objective way. And that is what I hope and pray that our young people will do, is be able to learn about their own faith tradition, be strong in their faith tradition, but also be joyful in understanding and respecting and valuing other faith traditions. and coexistence is so important. And I hope that that's something that we can see that they can do better than many of us have been able to do in past generations.
Several months ago, I had the opportunity to speak with a young girl who was struggling with a cancer diagnosis and going through chemo. At the time, her and I talked, and I pulled out a scripture that I love from the book of Deuteronomy and wrote it down and sent it to her. When thou goest out to battle, be not afraid, for the Lord thy God is with thee. Let not your heart faint, fear not, and do not tremble, neither be ye terrified, for the Lord your God is he that goeth with you. Her mom reached out to me a short time ago to tell me that Samantha clung to this scripture as she went through those final months, and then talked to me about an evening, their last evening together. And as they were together and the mom and dad by her bed, as it got to the very last moments, she looked at her father and said, "It's happening, isn't it?" And he said, "Yes, it is." And the last words Samantha said were, "Okay, I'm ready." And I love what we see from that example of a young girl who was prepared to meet her God. And I have faith in this rising generation. I trust that they know who they are and whose they are. And as we walk with them, as we learn from them, as we trust them, they are going to lead us to see faith in a whole new way, as you described for us, in a way that will be sweet but also powerful. And I believe this about them.
The youth of today are incredibly smart, and they're certainly talented. They just need a space to be heard, a place to be mentored, and an affirmative nod of encouragement to seize their moment and every opportunity afforded for their advancement. 2 Kings chapter 19, verse number 3, Hezekiah said, "For today is a day of trouble, of rebuke, of blasphemy, because the children have come to the birth, but there is no strength to bring forth." I believe that one of our prayers should be to summons the strength to create the space and the place for them to grow, to go, to flow, and to glow.
Would you give our panel a round of applause? We are honored now to present an award for strengthening the rising generation to Susan George, and I'd ask her, and I see your Archbishop is behind you, Timothy Cardinal Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, to come forward and be introduced by Pastor Heinrich Arnold of the Bruderhof community.
Thank you, Reverend, and thank you, panel, for that very interesting and hopeful discussion on the rising generation. And it's my privilege this afternoon, to give this award for the recognition for the achievement of strengthening of the rising generation to a very worthy woman, warrior, friend, sister, Susan George. And let me tell you a little bit about Susan. First time I met Susan was 2011 when she brought the Cardinal, His Eminence, up to Woodcrest Bruderhof and had an idea to strengthen family. Because how can we strengthen the rising generation if we don't strengthen true Christian family the way God created it? So she planned this event where the Cardinal, along with my father, who was our bishop, and Brad Wilcox, who does studies on family in the legendary Bardavon Theater in Poughkeepsie, What we didn't realize was that very evening, Governor Cuomo had passed the Marriage Equality Act, so that event was very culturally a battlefront, and it was quite something seeing that event. It was a real war on true faith and value, and it didn't look hopeful at that point. But there is hope. As we've heard, the rising generation is rising. Like Paul said, faith is hope in what we don't see. So those graphs might look like they're going down, but we know they're actually going up as we strengthen that new generation. So Susan is the nationally recognized nonprofit leader, and she is passionate about providing aid and opportunities to individuals in need. She currently serves as the Chief Advancement and Stewardship Office at the Archdiocese of New York, overseeing development initiatives that raise over $50 million annually to support the Church of New York and Catholic education and underserved communities. And her greatest pride stems from her transformative work ensuring that faith-based education remains accessible to those who need it most. Leading the Inner City Scholarship Fund, a really wonderful initiative, she launched a capital campaign that now provides thousands of inner city children annually with access to good Catholic education, giving them not just academic excellence, but a foundation of faith, of value, and hope that shapes their entire lives. Her ability to unite alumni and business leaders around the mission of education and faith demonstrates her gift for helping others see education as a sacred calling. By building and transforming boards of influential leaders, she created sustainable support systems that will impact generations of young people seeking to grow in both knowledge and faith. Susan's coordination of papal visits to New York and pilgrimages to holy sites around the world stand as a testament to her dedication to strengthening the Church's presence and inspiring the faithful, particularly the youth, the young Catholics who witnessed these historic moments. These visits reinforce the connection between faith and service that defines her work. Through her current role leading advancement initiatives for the Archdiocese, Susan ensures that Catholic institutions can continue their mission by forming young minds and souls. Her life's work embodies the principle that providing educational opportunities rooted in faith is one of the most powerful ways to strengthen the rising generation and to build a more just, compassionate society guided by Christian values and service. So it is my great privilege and our great privilege today to present the award for the achievement in strengthening the rising generation to Mrs. Susan George.
I'm just going to say a quick thank you. Pastor Arnold, thank you. Our partnership and friendship with the Bruderhofs is something that I've really enjoyed for a very long time. Your Eminence, your leadership, and especially your love for our youth, Catholic youth and our youth of our city, is something I get to witness every day, and how blessed we are to have you. And I just have to say that, I've been raising money for Catholic education for over 2 decades, and I think we can all agree what we heard today on this panel. I don't think there's ever been a time where we need this more in our country. So please don't give up. Thank you.